We then become like Buddhists or spiritual leaders or an advisor or a mentor to a person because you're dealing with healing of the spirit. Hello, welcome and kumusta. Thank you for joining me. This is How, your occupational therapist, and welcome to OT Conversations. In this episode, I would like to discuss or talk to you about the parallels of these two very popular models of occupational therapy. See, in the United Kingdom, there is always this talk about the models of occupational therapy, models of practice, and it appears like every student is obsessed with this. Students are encouraged to know about models of practice, and there is always a homework about the models of practice. And the very popular models most recently that's been coming out is the CMOP-E, Canadian Model of Occupational Performance, because definitely when I first encountered it, it was CMOP, Canadian Model of Occupational Performance. And that on its own was so amazing. I was so amazed when it came out in the 90s because it was so clear. And it talks to you that every individual has a core self, which they call spirituality. And this spirituality would be the one that will enable a person, or that would give the drive to a person. The person needed to be able to engage outside onto the context, be able to do their personal care, productive activities, work, leisure activities, so that they can engage in the culture as a society as a whole. For a person to enable to reach out to these things out in the culture, then there has to be a balance between the physical ability, the cognitive ability, and the affective ability. Affect being emotion, which is quite strange because by definition, affect is an external manifestation of the mood, of the subjective feeling. Subjective feeling is the mood, affect is the external manifestation. But for this model, they have used the word affect rather than psychological component, rather than the mood component. So you see, who's the proponent of this? Mary Law et al. And they've used that, changed a bit of a terminology. That's it. Very popular. And what's good is that it is a national understanding. That's why it's Canadian model of occupational performance. And I believe a lot of people in Canada are agreeing in this model. Everybody sees it the way it is. And so everybody is sharing the same clinical reasoning because of this model. But mind you, this is a more recent one compared to an older version of another popular model of practice or model of occupation. This is Professor Gary Kalhofner's model of human occupation. What was his model? He believes, and his model means that in every individual, there is this thing called volition in every person. And what is the volition? It is a person's value, interest, and personal causation. It is this thing that would drive a person to do the things that he needed to do. So he would do lots of repetitive, a person would do lots of repetitive habits and a combination. And a lot of these habits will form into a role. Because if you do things over and over again, you define and you will have a role. And then at the very bottom part of this model is the performance side. And in terms of the process, or process skills rather, or performance, under the performance is the process skills, the problem solving skills of a person, and the communication skills of an individual. Okay, so in this model of practice, it's that performance. It is the performance of the process, which is a person's ability to manipulate items, do the things physically, the process. Problem solving skills is about the cognitive ability of the person, and also the communication skills is a person's ability to express themselves or express what they wanted to do so they can communicate them. And there is a parallel between the two in the sense that the spirituality in the Canadian model of occupational performance is more defined in the model of human occupation. They've just broken down the spirituality to a person's value, personal causation, and interest. So there is the parallel between the two. That in every individual, there is a drive, there is a core drive. You may define this as a person's value, interest, and personal causation. Now, the roles and habits, quite unique to occupational performance or model of human performance, model of human occupation. So that is quite unique. But if you're working in a hospital, it's very hard to understand the interplay between the roles and the habits because the context of being in the hospital is just not the right context. If you're working in the hospital, you know where you want to go to, you know what the habits are, you know what the roles, you know what they needed to do. But this cannot be addressed in the hospital, and it needed to be addressed in the community. Now, when it comes to the process skills, yes, that's something that you do. You do an activity analysis about the person's problem-solving skills, the process skills, meaning the physical ability, and also their cognitive or communication skills. So you can do that thing. Which would be in the Canadian model, you assess the physical ability, the cognitive ability, but rather than the communication, it is the emotional component. There you go. Those are the two main differences. Does it work? These are models. These are ways on how we see an individual. It does not dictate an intervention. A model that suggests and recommends an intervention would be the ecology of human performance. The ecology of human performance will talk about restorative intervention, we'll talk about alter intervention, modify intervention, prevent intervention, and create intervention. So this is very good because from my experience, this is one model that tells you a method on how you will address the problems. I like that part. In terms of intervention, I guess the model of human occupation is telling you that if something is wrong with any of those areas that are raised by model of human occupation, then you can address it. For example, if there is something wrong with a person's value, then do something about it. Or if there is something wrong with a person's interest, do something that can generate a person's interest. If there is an issue about a person's personal causation, then there is also a reason for you to do that. The values, interest, and personal causation, mind you, is very much on the psychosocial side of occupational therapy. It's on the psychological side of things. Why not? You might say, the principles of occupational therapy started in mental health. That is one of the origin of the profession of occupational therapy. Occupational therapy's origin started with humanistic treatment, mental health practice. That has always been the beginnings of occupational therapy. And it is later on when we adapted into the biomedical model that we started looking at the physical dysfunction. So it will have roots in mental health, the values, personal causation, and the interest. When it comes to the roles and the habit, again, this is performance as the person does it. So it meant that you can have a therapy at home and make sure that the person is able to do the things every day. It can be an entire week's work. It can be a month's work if you are focusing on a person settling down with their routines and habits. And then on the performance side, process skills, problem solving skills, now this is where the physical dysfunction comes in. Process skills, meaning physical process, problem solving skills, cognitive process. Okay? This is where the parallel is with the Canadian model. You have the physical and the cognitive. But the communication skills, again, is very much different. With the Canadian model, if you have problems with the affect, then yes, deal with it. If there is a problem with the physical component, yes, deal with that. If there is a problem with a person's affective or emotional component and cognitive problem, yes, deal with that. Address those things. That's where the restorative intervention can kick in. The Canadian occupational performance. Nope. Yeah, a Canadian model of occupational performance. But then the spirituality is very vague. But it covers a lot of things. We are now going into the realm of esoterics, of psychology, of the mystical. We then become like Buddhists or spiritual leaders or an advisor or a mentor to a person because you're dealing with healing of the spirit. Yeah. That's why it becomes the art. This is where the art comes in, along with the science. Application. I am working in critical care. That is something that you can use in critical care. It justifies us working in critical care. Let us explain why. Why do you ask? Why is it important in critical care? Because when somebody is in critical care, definitely their personal drive, their personal causation is shaken. Their interest is shaken. Their personal causation can be shaken and can be challenged. Or, in other words, people will be questioning if they are awake and if they are thinking. There is an existential concern in critical care. Spirituality. That's where the CMOP comes in. So you can use CMOP as well in critical care because you are dealing with the intangible, their existential nature, their reason. And you can address this. How? Through early engagement. Early participation and early engagement. That is something that you can do, and you can use these two models in critical care. You address their process skills. You address their problem-solving skills through engagement, through doing. Again, there will be models that will be addressed over the years, like Mary Riley's. And I have to now actually read back through history books because these are some of the models. They are equally strong. And that's something that I promised to you. I'll have a discussion once I rekindle what it is all about. But it is about the doing. It's all about engagement, something like that. But don't quote me on it. Have a look at it. Mary Riley. Okay. What other applications can we have for these two models? Okay, yeah, when a person is very much ill in critical care or when they're in a very dependent state, you can use these things. Now, once they're off this, where the spirituality is not challenged, their core self is no longer challenged. When it's no longer challenged, then you can now look at other models particularly the ecology of human performance, where everything else is now about the task and it's all about the engagement, it's all about the doing. So it's an enhancement of a person's engagement and occupational engagement and participation. Then you can use some of the treatment approaches, the biomechanical frame of references, but these are all frames of reference in approach to a different problem. Making sure that what you do is based on a framework, as an occupational therapy framework, so that you'd be able to communicate occupational therapy to the wider public. You will be able to share yourself as an occupational therapist, be a source of inspiration to people you are encountering, to patients you are working with, to your colleagues. That's it. So if you enjoy this conversation, have a discussion amongst yourselves. Find peers, find friends, have a talk, share, learn together and grow together. Just remember, anything you do matters and has an outcome. Until next time, bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, talk to your friends and colleagues about it. Like it, subscribe, share, and do what you can to appease whatever algorithm that is at play. Just remember, guys, anything you do matters and has an outcome. Until next time, bye.